Welcome, Black Hollywood Live fans, to Justice is Served. We are talking about the breaking news. Comey's testimony is released, or his opening statement is, what does it prove about Trump's intent to obstruct justice? We'll talk about that and how Cosby's trial is underway with the alleged victim testifying first, followed by her mother. So much to talk about. Stay with us for Justice is Served.
You are tuned in to Black Hollywood Lives. Justice is served.
And in light of the way I introduced this show, this song sounds totally random, but we promise there's a reason for it.
There is a reason.
The goodness of the song itself is enough for me.
This is Drake's Cake, Pound Cake, sorry. And this show is Justice is Served here on Black Hollywood Live, where a panel of lawyers tells you about the latest in legal news. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chelsea Galicia. You can find me at Chelsea Galicia. I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow attorneys, Yemi Abayomi at, I should know this by now, at Yum Yums.
At a Yum Yums.
Got it, almost close. And Shaka Smith, who you can find at Shaka Strong.
Exactly. Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat.
Oh, yeah. He's probably the most active of all of us on that. So if you have comments, probably directed his way, he'll probably find it first.
Only positive ones.
Absolutely. All right, we have a really busy rundown to cover, starting with, I guess we should first talk about why we used this song. So this song was the subject of a suit against Drake for using copyrighted material. Yeah. There is a spoken word piece that is used in the song. I don't know if it was heard in the piece of the song that we listened to, but the words say something to the effect of real music only. The rest of this stuff is gonna
real
jazz
music lasts.
Right, yes.
The one that he
Drake,
samples,
you're right.
Drake samples real music lasts. And
only real music lasts
forever.
So the spoken word artist who he got it from was referring to jazz music as the only real music, and it's the only thing that's gonna last. And Drake used it but cut out the reference to jazz and just said only real music will last.
Yeah.
He used various pieces. He basically cut and spliced words. So they were all his words, but he cut and spliced them and rearranged them so that it said only real music would last. He removed the references to jazz.
So the estate
and other statements that were made.
Yeah. So the estate of the spoken word artist sued Drake and the label for copyright infringement.
Yeah.
And the reason why, there's so many music copyright infringement cases that we literally don't have enough time in the rundown to cover all of them. But the reason that I wanted to cover this one is because it's pretty surprising, seeing as how the way that Drake won this legal battle is kind of something that doesn't happen that often. Yeah. Maybe we should first start off by explaining what the fair use sort of exception is to copyright so that we can make sense of how Drake won this. Yeah. Who wants to be the copyright expert right now?
So in copyright cases, you have an item that's protected by intellectual property, and those artists who create those pieces are able to just determine how it's used, if it's exploited, and if somebody else uses your intellectual property, then that can be considered copyright infringement if there isn't a license to use the work. Or one of the other defenses to a copyright infringement is that this person didn't own a valid copyright, or that the individual who allegedly copied or infringed on your intellectual property had a fair use argument whereby they maybe only used a small portion. Well, they have a fair use.
The fair use is so that the news can quote things without having to get a license.
Documentaries.
And, criticism. Yeah. There's a couple of just exceptions that are what allow sort of us to quote, people. And not have a license because we're reporting on the news.
Even here on Justice is Served, when we show a clip, it's fair use. Yeah.
Right. So it's just it's saying that you're like using it, but not really in the intent to exploit the piece for the piece. It's got something else, a larger thing
Another
behind
value,
the use.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of a tough defense in the copyright world, but Drake was successful in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this case was interesting to me just because he, on summary judgment, so basically the court said there's not even a material issue of fact that makes me think that the plaintiff is going to prevail. Therefore, we're not even going to really.
So basically, that means they like cut it off at the knees.
Exactly.
Like,
Right.
didn't even let it go to trial. The judge made a finding that this does not have a legal chance of winning at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he based his finding on the fact that Drake's use of the track was transformative,
Yeah.
saying that with a copyright infringement, you might use somebody's intellectual property and maybe add a little bit of a change to it. But if you're still largely just using that person's intellectual property, you need a license. But the judge emphasizes the fact that if you're changing the message, adding a new element, and using as much as is needed, as much of the original piece as is needed to
Yeah.
make that transformative action take place, then that will constitute a fair use. And he says the original snippet of the spoken word is talked about how jazz music is the only real music, and it's
Yeah.
the only music that's going to stand the test of time.
Which was actually kind of part of plaintiff's argument, was sort of kind of washed against them. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, part of their argument was that they wouldn't have approved the license even in the first place because, this guy was talking about jazz music and he so loved jazz, and here Drake turned this into something that was really celebratory of hip hop. And
He would not have liked that.
He wouldn't have liked it.
Yeah.
But then the judge said, well, as a result, because it was transformative and it did.
Right.
Yeah,
So
elevate
he's
hip-hop.
adding a new message and a new meaning to this snippet. He's not using the snippet as it is. He's now reconstructed it, changed the message, and added a new element, which is that no, not just jazz music is going to stand the test of time, but just real music, period, will stand the test of time. So that was the judge's feeling on it being a transformative use of the work, and therefore Drake had that fair use argument.
Did you think that was a legit ruling?
Yeah, and given how small the usage was, even here we had trouble finding the spot in the song where we could find it.
Well, the usage was actually, the track itself is a minute long, and Drake actually used 35 seconds of it, so he did use a substantial portion, which is one of the fair use tests.
The full track is only a minute long?
The full track
spoken
of
word.
the spoken word is a
Yeah,
minute
yeah,
long,
yeah.
and Drake used 35 seconds of it, which is one of the things that the plaintiffs complained about, because one of the tests for a fair use is what portion of the work are you using? Are you using a substantial portion of it or a limited portion? But the judge goes so far as to say, it's not that you can only use no more than is necessary, but it actually permits a defendant to use as much as is necessary to transform the
And the larger
transform the
work is larger, so it's 35 seconds of the larger song. So it's not as if he just put that little piece out there and said, "Oh, this is mine now."
All right. Well, congrats, Drake, on that legal victory. Moving on now to the Comey testimony that was released. I didn't realize that we were going to get a copy of the opening statement
ahead
today.
of the opening statement.
Yeah.
Do we have like breaking news music?
I know, we kind of need that.
Yeah, right.
If we can find that in the engineer room, this would be a good time to use that. But so that was just surprising to me, although it's not uncommon that testimony, or at least the opening statement, is released, because that gives the people who are going to be asking the questions, in this case, it's a Senate committee.
Yeah.
To have a chance to look at the statement and ask questions about it,
Yeah.
or prepare their questions about it. There's still going to be questions by the members of the committee doing the questioning, but we saw the opening statement that Comey is set to give tomorrow morning at like 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 East Western time.
Extremely problematic for
Yeah.
for Mr.
So
Trump.
so in
For
that.
who?
Mr. Trump. I was gonna say president. I was like,
Yeah, it confirmed some of the things that had come out. For example, it confirmed that Trump asked Flynn for his loyalty.
Yeah.
It confirmed that Trump asked,
Comey.
not Flynn,
Yeah.
Comey, to drop the investigation into Flynn,
Yeah.
and to that Trump asked Comey to lift the cloud of suspicion that this Russia investigation was having on his administration.
Yeah. And also that Trump was never under direct, at least in this little time period, not under direct investigation by the FBI.
Oh, right. That Trump wanted
Indeed was
Comey
not-
to
but he-
come out publicly and
yeah.
say that Trump was not under
But he
investigation.
indeed was not. So yeah, because many of us didn't know if Trump was secretly under investigation. So at least that was confirmed. A win for Trump's side.
So that by itself, that looks pretty bad right there.
Oh, it looks it looks like textbook obstruction of justice, but.
And so the difficult part of obstruction of justice is proving somebody's intent. So not only that they, did something to obstruct an official investigation, but that they knowingly intended to corrupt or to dissuade an investigation from being completed.
Yeah, and I think you can take from Comey's changed behavior, because Comey mentions, he in the 8 years or the 4 years whatever he had with Obama, 6 years maybe, he had with Obama, he only talked to Obama twice. One, and both were in person, and one was to talk about justice issues, and the last was to say goodbye in 2016. In the 4 months that he's been with Trump, he's met with him 9 times, 2 in person, 6 on the phone, 3 in person. And that's really unusual. And after the first time, he immediately went to the parking lot to start recording these notes, these memos, because he felt so uncomfortable with the interaction. So I think that's really telling about whether or not the intent, or at least Comey's perceived intent by Trump, merited something more.
I thought another interesting part was Comey saying that in a meeting with Trump and Sessions, the Attorney General that we talk about not so adoringly on the show, that that Trump would ask Sessions to leave the room, and that made Comey more uncomfortable, and that makes it seem that Trump was saying something that he knew he should not be saying.
Even asking Jared Kushner to leave the room as well, who had apparently lingered in that meeting.
Yeah, so this does not look good for Trump, and I would say that the intent portion is like 95% proven. Between what Comey said in the statement today that he released, and Trump telling who was it that he told a news anchor, I fired Comey because this Russia thing.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of levity in the opening statement, I don't know if you caught it, where Trump asked for his loyalty, and then Comey later on reaffirms, well, I will be honest with you. And Trump says, perfect, I want your honest loyalty. So I did have a little bit of a laugh reading that.
Chuckle-worthy for sure. Yeah. Okay, so of course we're going to have the latest on whatever turns out from tomorrow's testimony. Yeah. But so far, is it fair to say that all of our money is on obstruction of justice has been met?
It certainly looks that way to me.
The next question is about whether or not that will actually lead to impeachment and the whole deal, but we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, I think after Thursday you might see a lot of people fleeing or maybe releasing details about Trump that are unsavory just to kind of save themselves and separate themselves from the administration. So, yeah. Yeah,
we shall see. It will be interesting. I was hearing on radio shows this morning that like bars around DC are planning like special happy hours, like mimosa and Bloody Marys.
It's a Super Bowl Sunday of politics.
And that they're going to give out like shots every time that Trump tweets during the testimony.
And we almost and I think Trump tried to blunt this news a little bit with the announcement of the new FBI director. But after the opening statement was released, that got buried under the news.
Right. I saw that name last night. I'm like, oh, maybe we should cover that on the show. And I'm like, who cares? Yeah. Although we probably should look at who that guy is. Okay. So back on to our sort of like a theme for the day are these like intellectual copy defamation violation suits. There's an interesting one being filed against Vivica A. Fox. And first I was like, oh my God, this is just too much drama for me to follow. She and a partner were doing some kind of male strip show tour. And when they had a difference of opinion, that I think that was it Vivica A. said something like, this is for women, this is not for gay men, the target audience.
So there was a movie called Chocolate City that was kind of a black version of the Magic Mike.
I haven't seen either of those movies.
We have no clips for you guys if you're watching, so sorry. We apologize in advance.
It was basically a black version of the Magic Mike movies. This guy, after seeing the response to Chocolate City, said, hey, let me do an all-male review and take these dancers on tour across 75 cities. So that was one piece that this guy, Lamar, I think was his name, was doing. Later on, he got connected with Lifetime. They ended up deciding to do a reality show based on the lives of black male strippers. Not some of whom were going to do this 75-city tour, some of whom were not. Yeah. So that show was what Vivica Fox was attached to. She was not attached to that 75-city tour, but she was attached to the reality show called Vivica's Black Magic.
So at what
the
point,
tour was called Black Magic Live, I think.
So the break in sort of the relationship between the guy and Vivica Fox occurred because...
So she makes this statement, and then they get a lot of LGBTQ response, obviously
Backlash.
very negative response.
Yeah.
So he goes out to kind of ameliorate the situation, and upon hearing him do the PR to kind of make the situation better, apparently it looks like she went out and started a side troop and poached some of the people from that group to join, and then told people, hey, look, he doesn't really care about you, he's not treating you well, come join me.
He's exploiting you, things of that nature.
Yeah, and worse yet, when he continued to have shows, she apparently publicly went out there and said, don't go to those shows, they are, it's a fraudulent show, don't go, and so people canceled their tickets.
In the advertising, he was saying some of the performers are from Vivica's Black Magic, which is true.
Yeah.
They were from the show, and that's the title of the show, Vivica's Black Magic. In her tweet, she was saying, they're using my name to associate me with the show.
Yeah.
Even though it was an incidental use and I guess factual, but she was saying, that's why she kept saying it's a fraud. They're trying to say that I'm associated.
And it was
with
really like his
tour.
show as well. She was the name of it.
Right.
So this sounds to me pretty much like she's guilty of libel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean
she-
as far as I can tell.
And the hardest part of these cases is generally proving damages because judges don't like them to be sort of a vague, I lost business or I was economically harmed. But in this case, if there were actual loss of ticket sales, that's something pretty measurable.
It should be pretty easy to prove, yes.
Yeah, so are we all on the same page about that, or you think that she's got a valid defense that I have not spotted?
I would have thought she actually had a defense before the social media stuff, because everything was sort of more circumstantial in terms of what she was telling dancers and what have you. But once you went to social media, then it's written, it's there, it's documented.
There. Buyer beware.
Yeah.
He's a fraud. He'll screw you over. Well, F you over.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe she can say that my statement of he'll F you over is an opinion, not an assertion of fact.
No.
But
I know that was going
not
on.
when it
But
relates to ticket
But
sales.
it does, and it does tarnish the reputation.
Yeah.
If he's in the business of putting on shows and selling tickets, and you're saying no, this person's a fraud, buyer beware. That's pretty.
Yeah,
squarely
we
within the
probably won't hear
defamation
very
realm.
much more about this case because if she's got decent attorneys, they're probably telling her to
Settle right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And put your Twitter down.
Yeah. Advice some people could all take, right?
Okay, this was an interesting one. So Katie Couric and those associated with a documentary called Under the Gun, which is a documentary about guns and the gun industry, gun lobbying and gun safety laws, were sued by a group that was referred to in the documentary called the Virginia Citizens Defense League. So these are obviously pro-gun people. What makes you chuckle?
I know.
I thought this was
That's
just such
so
a
funny.
I thought it was just a stupid lawsuit. I thought it was just really, really stupid. But
Wait,
anyways.
stupid by the people who filed it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you on that. So they were upset that in the documentary they're shown being interviewed by Katie Couric, and she asks a specific question. She says, if there are no background checks for gun purchasers, how do you prevent felons or terrorists from purchasing a gun?
Yeah.
To which the documentary shows 9 seconds of silence, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Yes, and the Virginia Citizens Defense League claims that pregnant pause was defamatory.
Yeah, it said it made them look like they were stumped, like they didn't know what they were, didn't have an answer to the question.
They were
And
uninformed.
They were uninformed.
They weren't fit to be
Gun-
in the gun selling business.
Yeah.
So the judge sort of parsed those out, and
Yeah.
about the fact that they were not fit to be in the gun business, the judge says that question has nothing to do with your knowledge of how the
How the gun laws work.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah.
that hypothetical would not
Who's allowed to buy guns?
Yeah.
Things that doesn't demonstrate that you're not fit.
right.
to run a business.
But the other part about what that pregnant pause meant.
Yeah, and so they said it made us look like we were stumped, but indeed they didn't. They never answered the question throughout the documentary that was posed to them.
Because they showed the actual footage to the judge
Yeah.
of what the people said, and what they answered with was something completely irrelevant to the question that she
Yeah,
asked.
they
Or
never-
it was
Yeah.
it was
They-
kind of like Trumpish. It's like it's or like Kellyanne Conway or whatever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like basically about the subject matter, but you speak around it, and so so they never actually answer the question.
Yeah, they were talking about how one of them answered that I think that felons should have the right to carry guns after they have served their time. Someone also said that, but there's already existing laws in place about the use of guns. So they were answering questions related to guns, but as you mentioned, not the actual question itself.
So the documentary depicted them not answering the question that they did not answer.
So, but what I did feel bad about them for is that at the time that Katie Couric went into this interview, she actually opened up the interview saying, "Hey guys, I need you guys to sit still for 10 seconds while my cameraman calibrates the equipment." And so in that 10 seconds, and that's where that 9 seconds of footage came from, was that moment of the 10 seconds where they're just sitting waiting for the cameraman to calibrate the equipment. So you see people kind of like looking down or like fiddling or looking around or looking at others in the circle in the discussion. And so I agree with them to the extent that it does suggest that moment was the moment in which they couldn't answer the question. But the fact of the matter is that moment was just the moment she told them to sit still, directed them to sit still. So I can understand why they'd be upset. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't arise to the level of filing a lawsuit for defamation. Yeah. But still, I understand why they have a little chip on their shoulder.
I just found it
for Hollywood.
I found it funny
Hollywood's
that
dramatization.
They were upset that they were shown not answering a question that they did not answer. So it's like, well.
And the judge said that they did it artistically.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did he say? He said dramatized sophistry.
Sophistry. Yes. And again, I guess if you're not if you're not used to, I guess, how Hollywood can do certain things, that might strike you as a little bit.
I'm sure.
So either way, the judge said not having an answer to a question on a difficult and complex issue is not defamatory.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if somebody makes you look dumb,
and you are in fact dumb,
and you in fact
on
do
the
not
particular,
and you're in fact ignorant of that specific question, making it known that you don't know the answer to that question or have a decent answer is fair game.
Yeah, again, like a negative connotation does not make it like false. So because
and that's what the judge emphasized, that it wasn't false.
Yeah.
They didn't answer the question, and the way they reflected them not answering the question may not have been
positive, but it certainly didn't make it false.
But it's not illegal.
But they didn't answer. Yeah. So.
All right. So moving on to a case that has been dubbed the biggest, or that could be the biggest defamation trial in American history. We're going to talk about the pink slime case. I'm sure the plaintiffs are, just cringing at the fact that any of us use that term, pink slime, and that's in fact part of the case itself. But the case was brought by Beef Products Inc., which just already creeps me out.
Are you a vegetarian?
I am what my boyfriend calls vegan adjacent.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And but there's like beef, but what beef products? It just sounds like scientific control. And that's another part of the case. So, anyways, I mean, Beef Products Inc. was upset that in March of 2012, ABC did a series of stories on their product, which is technically called lean, finely textured beef. But it's been dubbed pink slime by critics, not by ABC, but by others
even before.
But the company says that their use like 300 some odd times of the term pink slime in their stories and the way that they presented the product caused them to lose like 75% of their business. I mean, this was a big company that turned out like 5 million pounds of product a month. I mean, something pretty insane.
Yeah.
And so there are literally billions on the line. This company had to shut down several of its plants, lay off tons of workers, and things of that nature. And so ABC's job is to defend itself against this defamation trial. And I personally am on ABC's side, not just because I am grossed out by this product, but because I think that what they show in the stories about the product is true. Mm-hmm. It's just that the company doesn't like that it is being revealed.
Or the name pink slime.
Right. They don't like the use of the name pink slime. They also suggested that BPI had kind of coerced the USDA to I guess make
yes.
statements that the
And
food is
this
safe.
is why I am so passionate about politics, because they say that in the piece, ABC says the company didn't do anything illegal.
Yeah.
Because in a certain sense, we have a legalized system of corruption and bribery in this country.
Lobbying.
But that is the subject of the other shows that I do, political culture here on BHL and the Trump Report on AfterBuzz TV, both on Tuesdays. You can look up those times. But that's what ABC said that the company did, is basically lobby the USDA to support the product.
Yeah,
basically.
affirm the safety of the product.
Yeah.
I am all riled up about this. Anybody else? Like, I am fascinated by
Riled
how.
up about-
Like, I cannot wait to see how this turns out.
Yeah, well, to me, I think ABC will be. I think they'll be found not to be held liable for these damages, because again, they're doing news reporting. They didn't coin the term. They simply used a term that was out there. Unless you can show there's some malintent on ABC's part to specifically target this company.
Well,
Oh,
they're
that's a good
saying
point.
that they purposefully did not seek out individuals that would refute their points towards the safety of the product.
But they actually don't have
though
to.
yeah.
Even though they could have. So.
Yeah.
And the reason that this case is actually going to be harder for BPI is because the judge has found that BPI is a public figure.
Yeah.
So often we talk about on this show that if you say something defamatory about a private citizen, they're going to have an easier time winning their case than if you say it about like a celebrity, because they have the means and the
The
platform.
malice
Yeah.
is
Right, it adds
Yeah.
a malice intent. So
Exactly.
it's a higher bar for BPI to have to meet, and I
So-
don't think they'll meet it. Are you thinking maybe they will?
I mean, I think when you add in the malice element, it makes it a bit more difficult. But to the extent that they were purposefully avoiding putting together a balanced story,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they're
But-
in the hole already, even just in terms of having to defend this to begin with.
But then again, like during the process of discovery, if people at ABC were loose with their emails and said things like, "We really want to make sure BPI never makes any food again,"
Well, there's
part-
one piece of the story where they talk about when BPI announced that they were shutting down several plants, that the reaction at the ABC studios was people cheering and
Yeah.
celebrating, i.e., we've achieved our goals of shutting down this company.
Yeah, so-
But if they did a real story that showed that this product is not healthy for consumers, or that consumers now were informed enough to make an informed choice, and that their
Yeah.
story is
Well,
in fact
they-
making a difference on public awareness.
But
That's great,
but what is considered healthy and what is considered safe, first off, is subjective
But
in the first
that-
place.
but-
And it hasn't been shown to be unsafe, quote unquote, or unhealthy.
But if
There is
that's-
not anything. I mean,
but if that's
look at
what we're-
French fries, look at sodas,
But if
look
that-
at all of this.
But if that's what we're reading in an email, that would take out the actual malice. But if it's just simply to get them to lose profits, I think then you'll see the
it's
actual
like
malice.
we hate the CEO for some personal reason,
Yeah.
and now we took them down.
Yeah.
That would be malice. So I'm interested to
It'd
see
be tough
how that
to
one
prove,
goes out.
but you never know what you find in discovery. So.
Yeah. All right, so let's finish off with a study. A police study found that police officers are less polite, less respectful to black drivers.
This was in the Journal of Things We Already Knew, right? Is that where the study came from?
That's, it actually was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which may or may not be related to the publication you're speaking of. But I thought that this was a really interesting study, that they at least did it,
Yeah.
and that a police department signed itself up for it.
Yeah, well, they were smart. They used 2014. They used 1 month, but it was good that they used these cameras that they have to actually figure out what's going
The
on.
city
with
of
community
Oakland
relations, yeah.
allowed researchers to look at body cam footage and use that as data.
Yeah.
And so I could see how some people might read this and be like, oh, a study finds police officers disrespectful. Maybe that's just subjectively because black drivers are more likely to complain about how police treat them than white people are. And so it wasn't a subjective study at all.
It was
It
super
took
objective,
researchers who looked at the language, and the language is like categorized, and like it was really well sort of objectified.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of the subjective, like, oh, it's just people's feelings hurt, kind of element out of it.
Then they had volunteers look at the stuff, and for each recording they had 10 volunteers look at it. So you weren't just getting like one person's view of it; you were getting 10 people's view per recording. And I think it was something like 183 recordings over 981 stops.
So really, like a study that's got some like credibility to it.
Yeah.
I think for sure. I don't think anybody can argue that. The question then is, of course, is this an isolated occurrence in Oakland, or is this something that's true around the country? That may be another study published in your, what is it?
Journal of Things We Already Knew.
Yeah. And I do hope that it begins a trend of looking at it, and that, police training will be
even
implemented
in Oakland,
to help address this.
I guess they already had a hint that this was kind of going on, and so they've already implemented some stuff in Oakland where, they put placards around the police department about respect and how to deal with
like,
community.
write you sir or ma'am rather than first name, or
please and thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
XYZ.
And so already Oakland's kind of taking a lesson from that. So it would be great to see other departments do their own studies, but also start implementing things that would help community relations.
I can see some people probably on the other, end of the spectrum from us being like, oh, this is just a bunch of whiny, sensitive people that cry about how police talk to them. But actually, this has really serious ramifications, because this kind of thing, the disrespect and the animosity between officers and civilians from the get-go, is oftentimes what leads to more dangerous events, either in that one specific episode or general distrust, general, like ineffectiveness of the law enforcement in those communities where people feel that they're being disrespected.
And it was significant because I believe it was 57%. They were 57% more likely to use positive and respectful phrases with white motorists, and they were 61% more likely to use negative phrases with black motorists. So it's pretty significant.
The numbers were not just like it's a close thing at all. They
Yeah.
were pretty decisive. All right. Well, I mean, I guess it's a sad reveal.
Yeah.
But
a good trend. I think that it's good that we're.
Study, and hopefully it'll be replicated across other cities. I'm sure to start more progressive cities, and then maybe at some point the less progressive cities.
Right.
Which
okay. Well, I think we're going to leave off on that somewhat of a good note, right?
Yeah.
Justice
Positive.
is on its way to being served.
Yeah.
All right. That will have to do it for us this week. Please join us next week for another episode of Justice is Served. And in the meantime, like, comment, especially on Shaka's Instagram and Snapchat and whatever all accounts that he has. But let us know what you think and stories that you're interested in us covering. Until then, see ya.
See you guys.
Bye.
From executives Keven Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio, Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood
Redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.